guys finished last. You are running out of gas. Your sympathy will get you left behind. Sometimes you're at your best when you get a new episode of Columbia House Party. Jake, are you at your best today?
I'm all right. As good as I'm going to be, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll be all right. Right?
Yeah, we'll be fine. Whatever.
This is one of the most take-heavy bands that there are, I think. And I think when you span like infinite albums over 30 years, you are going to, similar to our AFI episode where like we kind of grouped AFI fans into three different eras that might feel differently about the different eras, the other eras rather. I think you can do the same for today's band. And if you rewind back to when the show first launched, even when we were pitching it, a big part of the draw was we're going to get Jake fired up about some hot takes. Now, because we've had guests at sometimes, because Jake is a good podcaster, and because sometimes I pour a little cold water on the hot takes sometimes, Jake hasn't always gotten to unleash those very, very hot takes. Today is a different one, is a little different. So Jake has hot takes. So we're going to get to those at the end. This is like I said, a very hot takey band in general. Jake, what do you have for us?
Like other bands we've covered, this is one that doesn't need a ton of introduction. What I will say about this band is that they were my first legitimate favorite band. They were the first band that I had like the poster on the wall in my bedroom. They were the first band that I like wanted to know everything about and wanted to have all their albums. I remember being on vacation in BC when I was quite young and just like going to record stores and trying to find as many things I could. I think I even have a bad bootleg of a live show that they used to sell in stores that were like not fully legal. If you remember that, of this band. And this is my favorite album of that band. Although maybe that's a lot closer than I thought it was, which I realized while researching this, and maybe we should have chosen the record before this, but we'll get into that. So today, to start season 2 of Columbia House Party, we're talking about Nimrod by Green Day.
I was a young boy that had big plans. Now I'm just another shitty old man. What did I burn and I hate everything. The world told me so fuck you. Glory days don't mean shit to live. I take a six-pack of empathy. Life's a bitch and so am I. The world told me so fuck you. Wasted youth and a fence full of ideals. I had a young and optimistic point of view. Wasted youth and a fence full of ideals. I had a young and optimistic point of view. I need the bullshit, my gut's getting bad. Oh my god, I'm turning out like my dad. I'm always sure I got a bad attitude. The world told me so fuck you. Oh, it's like niggas, they can't fuck it up. I don't have sex cause I can't get it up. I'm just like blood sitting on the couch. The world told me so fuck you. The world told me so fuck you. The world told me so fuck you.
That is The Grouch from Green Day's Nimrod. Jake, normally, we do the why did we pick this album? I think it's pretty obvious in this case, but let's reshare a story. We kind of went through our friendship and how our friendship revolves around music in particular, which included getting stranded in Hamilton after an insanely long Green Day show in March of 2017. Before we get into our individual connections, let's just reflect on that very... look, Against Me were good. The first little bit of Green Day was good. And then they did like a million covers and played 31 songs.
I actually think about this show a lot, which is odd for like a show I didn't like that much. I don't know if you have the same, but for a show that I was stone cold sober at, I remember very little of it. Like, of like the actual music and concert itself. Like, I know what songs they played because I've looked at the set list. I remember Against Me set. I remember being in that creepy bar after we missed our bus later in the evening. but the actual like last like hour and a half of Green Day's set just like doesn't really exist in my brain, which I find kind of odd.
You don't remember their Chuck Berry and Operation Ivy and Queen and Ramones covers?
Kind of. Like, I know they happened and I know I was there, but they're not like, you know, like the year before you and I went to see Blink-182 at the amphitheater, and I was not stone cold sober for that show. And I remember it way better than I remember the Green Day show.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a weird one. And I wonder how much of that is like, a part of why both of us wanted to go was because Against Me were opening. And then also like about halfway through the Green Day set, I think we both started looking at like what time that last bus home was and worrying.
Yeah, I wonder if it was in Toronto, if we would have, like, even if the songs that we didn't care about, I wonder if we would have enjoyed them more not having that like, we gotta go thing on our mind.
Yeah, I mean, if it were in Toronto, I would have just got really drunk.
Right. And then I probably would have loved it.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't not enjoy it. I just
enjoyed
some parts of it more than other parts of it.
Yeah. And the time and age dichotomy really threw me for a loop.
Yes. 3 generations of Green Day fans. The rare show where you simultaneously feel too old and too young to be there.
Yeah. The realization mid-show that American Idiot was 13 years old at the time was, not what I needed.
Yeah, that's going to see a band that I tapped out on over a decade ago is a tough one. We're going to talk about some of the later Green Day stuff in later eras a little deeper into the podcast toward the back end. But Jake, specifically Nimrod, this wasn't even like a debate or a conversation. You just messaged me when we were, kind of kicking around planning ideas. You were like, I got it. Let's do Nimrod. Why Nimrod for you? Why does this one stand out?
Well, I mean, I figured for the first episode of A New Tree, it had to be a band that like is a big one, I think. And Green Day, as we haven't done them yet, seemed like an obvious choice. And Nimrod, I've always liked Nimrod the most of the Green Day albums. I think it's their most interesting. And like, I think that obviously they got big into, call it bombast or trying to do big things outside the world of pop punk later on. But I actually think this one is the most successful at that, and that it played with a lot more styles than they had at the time. And even though American Idiot and to a lesser extent 21st Century Breakdown have their big sort of multi-song suites and theatrical flourishes, I think that Nimrod's breadth is more effective at showing their talent than any of those albums are. Not that I dislike American Idiot, which is a whole thing we'll get into in a bit, but I just think that, going from basically a hardcore song into a ska song into an acoustic ballad is more effective here than all 9 minutes of Jesus of Suburbia, if that makes sense.
It's only 9 minutes, eh? Wow. I guess it just feels like 20.
I think Homecoming's 11, so.
So for me, Nimrod was, it's not like the Green Day album for me. I like it a lot, though. I kind of have to give away a bit of the debate segment later. It's kind of 3 Green Day albums at the top for me. Dookie in 1994, I would say, is one half of like me discovering pop punk or punk or whatever you want to call these bands at that time, along with Smash from Offspring, which, one of those holds up better than the other. I got both of these on tape borrowed from my friend Charlie, and I got in trouble for the swearing on Bad Habit, the stupid, dumb shit, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Which, ironically, Green Day then borrows on Platypus on Nimrod. They basically do the same thing.
I noticed that yesterday, too. I never made that connection until literally yesterday also. That's funny you say that.
Yeah. So, I don't know if that was intentional or what. But anyway, I got in trouble for having Dookie on cassette and had to give it back to Charlie's. Or sorry, I got in trouble for having Smash, rather, on cassette. And I kept Dookie hidden a little better, or lyrically at least. Anyway, and then Insomniac was one of the first albums that I bought. It was not the first, which is something we're going to talk about in the coming weeks for both of us, as well as some friends maybe. But it was up there among the first. I would have been 11 when Nimrod came out, which is weird because I definitely thought I was older. Like, I thought my Green Day fandom came a little later on. Like, I thought Nimrod, I would have guessed Nimrod was like 1999, not 1997.
Yeah. I wonder if that's a Green Day thing, because I actually agree with that. Because, like, there's no way I bought this. Maybe I was just a really cool 11-year-old, is the other right.
answer.
Like, what was I when this came out? I was 9. But I feel like maybe I had it on cassette, which also doesn't make sense. But the timing of it is... No, but I wouldn't have had it, is the thing. Not that it didn't exist, but I just think that, to your point, they are placed in my head at a later year than it was. But there's a lot of incongruousness in my memory on this, I think.
Yes. Anyway, whatever era, or whatever, not even era, whatever year Nimrod came out, we're going to talk about that album and probably just talk around Green Day as a whole, or at least like Dookie, Insomniac, Dookie through Warning, I guess, era Green Day, specifically Nimrod, after this. All right, Jake, give us the Green Day background a little bit. Like we've done with bands like Blink and Alkaline Trio and stuff, I don't think we need to go too deep here, especially because I think we'll probably do one of the earlier albums at some point. I mean, you had that idea of like maybe doing 4 Green Day albums in a row, and I was just a little worried about if anyone's not a Green Day fan, they'll never come back to us. But there's definitely a lot of material here in this, 93 through 2000 Green Day. So give us a rundown.
I mean, I think like there's like 5 or 6 albums we could have done here, but we didn't because it was my choice. So tough. So Green Day formed in 1987 under the name Sweet Children, formed by Billy Joe Armstrong, Mike Dirnt, and Raj Punjabi. Punjabi was later replaced on drums by John Kiffmeyer. Billy Joe and Mike Dirnt were just 15 at the time the band was founded. In 1988, Larry Livermore, the head of Lookout Records, saw the band play a show and signed them to a deal. In 89, they recorded their debut EP, 1000 Hours. But before that EP was released, they changed their name to avoid confusion with another band in the Bay Area called Sweet Baby. In 2001, Billy Joe Armstrong said that Green Day is possibly the worst band name in the world, which it's not, but I get it.
Yeah, as we've discussed at length, there are no good band names.
No. And Green Day, I think, actually isn't the worst one.
It's fine. It doesn't...
Yeah.
It's completely unobjectionable.
Yeah. Their debut album, 39 Smooth, was released in early 1990, which was followed by the Slappy and Sweet Children EPs. Also in 1990, John Kiffmeyer left the Bay Area to go attend college and was replaced by Trey Cool, at first on a temporary basis, but then the band decided to keep Cool on a permanent basis with Kiffmeyer's blessing. Kiffmeyer would later go on to executive produce Dookie, so he wasn't completely gone from the fold immediately. Also kind of crazy that, save for like session musicians, Green Day have just been the same 3-piece for 30 years, which is... I don't know why I think that's cool, but it is.
It is cool. It's, man, if a certain other pop punk 3-piece could stay together for that long, what would the world be like?
We'll never know. In 1991, the band released their second album, and one of the most important albums in my life and music development, which is an album called Kerplunk.
What, did your parents like play it for you when you were in the crib?
I got Kerplunk later. It was just like, I knew Green Day as the Dookie Nimrod band for a long time. And then when I was like 13 or 12, I found a copy of Kerplunk, and I didn't know I thought Dookie was the first album.
I thought that for a really long time too, because you don't, like, it's not like you can go back and it's not like you can Wikipedia the discography at that point.
Exactly. And like, I'm from Toronto, not from the Bay Area
at that point. Yeah.
Right. And so when I found Kerplunk, I was like, what's this? And I'll get into this later. I love Kerplunk, and it was because it was a little more punk in sort of. It was just a big album for me, and getting outside just the Dookie and the Nimrod of pop punk, so to speak, and like Anima of the State, etc. Anyway, Kerplunk is great. It's not quite the sound that they would form with Dookie, and it definitely lacks the polish, but it's all there. The underground success of Kerplunk led to interest from major labels, and the band soon left Lookout and signed to Reprise Records and gained the attention of producer and quote-unquote fifth Beatle Rob Cavallo. Billy Joe Armstrong told Spin in 1999 regarding switching to a major label, "I couldn't go back to the punk scene, whether we were the biggest success in the world or the biggest failure. The only thing I could do was get on my bike and go forward." Because bikes are punk.
Well, hey, especially in the Bay Area, man. The calves those guys must have had.
After signing to Reprise, the band underwent a 3-week recording tour to record a recording sojourn, as I have in my notes for some reason, to record what would eventually become Dookie. I'm not going to get into Dookie right now because we'll definitely do an episode at some point. Yes, and also, please. It's also like an album that needs no explanation at all.
But we're going to spend an hour to an hour and a half on it at some point.
Yeah. They then became one of the biggest bands in the world. After Dookie, they toured extensively, including spots in Lollapalooza and famously or infamously at Woodstock 94, where they started that big mud fight that I think is in the When I Come Around video. Dookie won Best Alternative Album at the 1995 Grammys and was nominated for 9 MTV Video Music Awards. And in 1995, they released their 4th album, Insomniac, which, to tease one of my hot takes later, I think is way better than Dookie, but we'll talk about that later. And this is a song from that record called 86.
What brings you around? Did you lose something the last time you were here? You'll never find it now. It's buried deep with your identity. So stand aside and let the next one pass. Don't let the door kick you in the ass. There's no return from 86. 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 Shall even try.
Well, yeah, way to give away the ending.
Oh, there's more to it than that.
I mean, look, Insomniac's probably worth its own episode at some point as well.
I would agree with that.
Because it rules.
86 is about a topic that will come up later on Nimrod as well. So it's a tease as well, because we're getting better at
the
structure.
year I was born, it's about me. As all things are.
Insomniac was pretty well received. Got a 4 out of 5 from Rolling Stone, who said, "In punk, the good stuff unfolds and gains meaning as you listen without sacrificing any of its electric haywire immediacy, and Green Day are as good as this stuff gets." Which sounds like a commercial. Insomniac was not as commercially successful as Dookie, which, like, fair.
Yeah, what was?
Right. It still sold 3 million copies in the United States. The band then went on another massive tour for this album, which ended with them canceling the European leg, citing exhaustion, which I think is fair because they were going pretty much nonstop from 1990 to 95. In 1997, during this semi-break hiatus, they began working on their new album, which is what would become the album we're talking about today, which is Nimrod. Rob Cavallo back in the producer chair, which the band apparently never considered replacing him at all. They all felt that Insomniac was kind of a letdown commercially and didn't perform like they're hoping. Billy Joe Armstrong told Billboard in 1997 that Insomniac did a lot better than I thought it was going to. From the sound of it, we knew it wasn't going to sell as much as Dookie. That was also compounded by the fact that the Insomniac tour was their first tour, which saw them headlining arenas rather than clubs. which they found uncomfortable. As they told Mark Spitz, who is their biographer, they said, "We were becoming the things we hated, playing those big arenas. It was beginning to not be fun anymore," which is kind of funny seeing how that's all they do now.
Yes, this era of Green Day kind of rebelled against that, as we'll talk about in a little bit. And then modern Green Day is like, no, let's just make stadium rock songs that borderline, the songs are in service of these giant stage shows a lot of the time. And in some cases, quite literally a stage show.
It's kind of crazy how much, especially looking at what they do now, how much of a sticking point this was for them. I also found an interview with Kerrang from that time where Billy Joe said that playing for that hour a day was fun, but the rest of the day was a blank. We were beginning to not have any fun, so we decided to stop before it was 6 months too late and things really started getting unpleasant. And I get that they were a young band, still very much trying to carry the punk ethos and all that, I'm not criticizing them for becoming the stadium rock band they are today, but it's just interesting how against it they were. And then, 7 years later, but also, money is fun. So I get it.
Money is, I don't know. I assume money is fun.
Green Day money, I'm sure, is great.
Yeah.
Anyway, they headed to Conway Studios in Los Angeles to record this record, once again with Rob Cavallo, as I said.
By the way, is Cavallo, has he now set, he has to have come up on the podcast more than anyone else, right?
I would think so. If not directly, then albums that he's had his hands in. Even just his opening paragraph on Wikipedia is Green Day, Linkin Park, MCR.
Yeah, I feel like I've had his Wikipedia page open more than anyone else during the last year.
Also a hilarious list off the top of just everything from My Chemical Romance to Eric Clapton to Jawbreaker to Alanis to Paramore to Lil Peep.
Yeah.
Sixpence None the Richer, Phil Collins.
Dude's a hit maker.
He really, really is. You're good when your Wikipedia has a partial production discography rather than the full thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, the recording of this album was not the most fun for the band. They also made it not fun for people around them. When they were in Los Angeles, they stayed at the Sunset Marquise, which is a famous rock star hotel, during which time they got up to some classic rock star hijinks, like getting drunk and Trey Cool threw a TV out his window once, because making things hard for service people is punk. Mike Dirnt told Spitz in their biography, "One night, one of us was walking down the halls, knocking on people's doors while naked."
By the way, that's something I actually never really, I've never really thought about until now, that this idea of it being very rock and roll to destroy a hotel room. It's do you think the label has to come clean it up? I realize that the label probably has to foot the bill for damages, but the label is not tipping the people who have to clean all that up.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks. Part of this was because of the intense recording schedule of this album. They went every day from noon until 2 a.m, which the band found frustrating and led to even more drinking, which then I'm sure led to more hijinks, etc. It got to the point that Rob Cavallo had to enlist his father, who was also his manager, named Pat Magnarella, to come and try and keep the band in line.
Also punk rock, having to get your parents to come along.
Get your dad to come talk to them. Yeah. The band really wanted to make this, as sort of I was alluding to earlier, they wanted this to be a more experimental album than what they had done before. There's a lot of talk about relating it to London Calling when you talk to them about the album in terms of the varying sounds. Billy Joe Armstrong said he wanted to break the constraints of traditional punk music, which naturally then leads to the album opener, which is an extremely typical Green Day punk song. Although I will say, I think it's an underrated Green Day single. They don't really play it live anymore, and it's a really good song. And I wish this one had the rotation in sort of new Green Day world that some of the stuff from this era does. This is the first song off Nimrod. Nice Guys Finish Last.
Nice guys finish last. You're running out of gas. Your sympathy will get you left behind. This time you're at your best.
So I love that as an album opener because, especially coming off the heels of Insomniac, because right away, it sounds like you're getting the Green Day that you really know and love. And also, like, Walking Contradiction is one of my favorite songs from Green Day.
Another
and,
underrated single.
Yeah, an all-time great music video, by the way.
Yes.
But, like, all the lyrics in there are just, like, so heavy irony. And Nice Guys Finish Last is, like layers that on. So I feel like thematically and tonally, it's a nice continuation from Insomniac. And then to Billy Joe's point, they do try a lot of out of their, maybe not their comfort zone, but like, especially we'll get into Good Riddance and like when it was actually written and stuff. But out of the zone that they had been successful with to date. But they kind of, lull you into not expecting that by coming at you with like, among the 3 or 4 most Green Day, like most Dookie Insomniac Green Day songs on the album.
Yeah. And like even like Hitchin' a Ride, which I don't think is experimental, but like for a track 2, it opens with like a Petra Haden violin solo, which is not a thing you would hear on their previous records, even though then it goes into a very traditional Green Day song.
Another bizarro video too.
Yes, extremely weird.
Hitchin' a Ride, by the way, as a single, got so overplayed on Much Music that
it did.
I like borderline was not allowed to listen to it in the house, not for any reason other than like my mom could not hear Hitchin' a Ride one more time.
I have a whole theory about how Hitchin' a Ride is the link between like this era of Green Day and the American Idiot era of Green Day, even though there's so much that happened in between this and American Idiot. But to me, it sounds the most like a song that could be on, other than Good Riddance, that could be on American Idiot as well. But maybe that's why I don't like it as much.
Good Riddance, or maybe, I know you want to talk about Redundant later, but I think that's kind of one of the transition songs as well. Even Walking Alone, I guess, is like a warning song.
Yeah, I would say Redundant's a warning song as well. But
yeah, that's fair.
We'll get into warning later. Anyway, the writing process for Nimrod was mostly Billy Joe writing songs acoustically, with the rest of the band adding instrumentation later and then working on tempos and fine-tuning. They recorded about 30 songs for this record and ended up using 18 of them. Also funny, thinking about where they are as a band today. Mike Dirnt said that the album was not very cohesive intentionally so. There was no concept in mind or attempt at making a cohesive record. It's just a loose collection of songs. He told The Telegram in 1997, "We've always screwed around with different types of music during our jams, but we'd say, okay, let's stop and go back to the album. This time we just let them come up," which I think this, and I guess to a lesser extent, Warning and Insomniac, which feel the most like loose collection of songs until the trilogy, which I don't want to talk about. Like, it's interesting to me how like they seems like they have more creativity to them when they're just being loose rather than their strict concepts.
Yeah, and I think, you read up a little bit on Good Riddance and when it was written and why it didn't. So like Good Riddance was written in 1993 and was like basically rejected for Dookie because they just couldn't find a place for it where it fit. And I think, first of all, the original version of Good Riddance is faster and doesn't have the strings in it. It's a different song, the Dookie era one, but it's like also that idea that they wrote what would eventually be their most popular and commercially successful song, and twice they couldn't fit it on an album. And then it's on Nimrod when they first start trying some different stuff, like Good Riddance and like some of the other songs you mentioned. I don't know. I just think Green Day's always had this like weird vibe to me of like the way you kind of teed it up, where like they didn't like the stadium rock stuff at this point. And I feel like I'm maybe projecting on their behalf here, but like, it felt like they thought they had to be a certain thing at this time. And it wasn't until maybe the success of Good Riddance or maybe just the success of Nimrod where kind of they became free to do whatever and just trust, hey, whatever we make is going to be enormously successful. But yeah, anyway, that's Good Riddance being like twice not making the album and then changing the trajectory of Green Day completely is it's just an interesting wrinkle to this one, I guess.
Yeah,
and I think, like, to your point about wanting to try a lot more stuff and not having, like, I feel like, that's where I was going with this. Your point about it not having like a cohesive theme or concept, it sounds like it was pretty freeing for them. Whether you like where they ended up going after this album or not, it certainly seemed like they've been holding back some out of genre creativity that they never got to until around this point.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point about them sort of being a band at war with themselves, so to speak, in that, and maybe this is me putting this on them, which is also kind of my point, that I feel like Green Day have always sort of been at odds with and trying to work out what they wanted to be in contrast with what everyone else wants them to be. And like, I don't want this to sound like I'm saying, oh, poor multimillionaire rock star musicians, but I do feel like, you know, when they got banned from 924 Gilman Street, which we'll talk about in a sec, for signing to a major label. And then they got shit on for making a rock opera instead of making more major label punk music. And then they got shit on for making really terrible music. Maybe that one's deserved. But like, I just feel like I don't know what, for a band that's been around for 3 decades, I don't know still what kind of band Green Day really wants to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point they want to be a very rich band.
Yeah,
and I think
that's fair.
And I think too, like, I don't mean that as like they're this cynical group of assholes, because like as much as that show we went to dragged for us, they seem to be having a blast.
Yeah.
Like Billy Joe Armstrong lives to play like a Chuck Berry song on stage for 15,000 people or however many they play
like,
to.
They put on a good show. It's just not necessarily the show for us, which is fine. Anyway, something that I found interesting was obviously Green Day always gets saddled with the Clash influence, or if you've seen High Fidelity, the Stiff Little Fingers influence. And obviously there's a lot of talk on this album about London Calling and that kind of stuff. But I found interesting that Billy Joe Armstrong told Billboard in sort of the press tour for this record that one of his major influences for this was Bikini Kill. He said that I really like the way that Bikini Kill's last record came out. They challenged themselves more. They have some really rough punk songs. I was into the way they did it, and since they come from the same background, it was easier to relate to than something like London Calling. That record was done in a completely different era. The way we think of this band is sort of that we're the last rock and roll band on the planet, which is funny because that's what the fucking Clash said. But everybody's getting into electronic and folk kind of music, and nobody's really bashing it out. We're a garage band, no matter how you look at it. And it's funny to me that no matter what, is it like a rule that if you're a mainstream rock and roll band, part of your press tour has to be nobody's playing rock music anymore? I think every single major label mainstream arena rock band has to make that quote. Like Bono's said it. I'm sure fucking Dave Grohl's said it. I'm sure we'll hear Blink say it at some point, even though they're
it's not unique to rock either, though. Like Kanye says it. Like,
yeah, it's true. Anyway,
does anyone make real shit anymore?
One of the varied styles on this album, just because it goes everywhere. You have a ska song with King for a Day. You have acoustic ballads. You have an instrumental surf rock song.
King for a Day is so goofy and fun.
I love it so much.
Like, I know that it's nowhere near like the best songs on this album, but it has to be like one of the ones that I played the most when I was like a kid and first got this album, because it is just like so silly and like just like yell.
Yeah, I appreciate that it's like a end of album track that's just Billy Joe trolling dipshit homophobes, which I always appreciate. But one song that is part of these varied sounds I want to talk about relates to a song we played earlier, 86 off Insomniac, and that song is Platypus, I Hate You.
Don't pretend that you
Platypus is a shot at Tim Yohannan, who is the founder of the venue I mentioned a minute ago, 924 Gilman Street, which is a punk venue in, I think, Oakland, definitely in the Bay Area, that is like the mecca for the sellout discussion because they hate those dirty sellouts. Green Day kind of got their start at Gilman Street, played a lot of shows there in the Kerplunk 1039 era, 1039 era, whatever. And then when they sang to Reprise, put out Dookie, they were banned from playing 924 Gilman Street because they were sellouts. They've been criticized often by Yohannan for having a quote unquote poppy sound. And they were banned until like 3 or 4 years ago, I think, when they played a show there and only played old songs there, which I think is funny. So it seems like that feud has died finally, but there are 3 Green Day.
Also, aren't the Offspring one of the biggest bands to like make that venue really popular too? Like,
but I think they were. They were banned too.
Yeah, like you can't just like be a venue space that launches younger local acts and then like be mad when they get successful. I mean, I guess you can, but it's not a very good way to do to get things like, hey, this band that is really big now is coming back to your venue.
Yeah, no group of outsiders has ever been as gatekeepy as early 90s punk guys. But there are 3 Green Day songs telling this guy to fuck off, which I think is kind of funny.
Sorry, Green Day wasn't as punk as The Offspring and AFI and
look, Miss Murder. But yeah, so Platypus is the most direct song about this. 86 is also about it, and Haha, You're Dead, which is a very fun song, which I think is on their Shenanigans compilation, if I remember correctly, are all shots at Yohannan. This was a whole thing until very recently, which, I don't know, find some value with your time, guys.
You know what? What are you going to do? You're massively successful and very rich, and I don't know much about them personally, but I'd imagine they have like families and stuff, and you got to be mad at something. Yeah,
I guess that's true. Who am I to talk? Whomst as they say.
Yeah, you constantly got to find slights to magnify and keep driving yourself. That's true.
Another song that sort of courted some controversy, which is a story that I don't fully understand still, but I found it kind of odd, so I thought I'd bring it up, is the song Uptight, which during the chorus, Billy Joe mentioned suicide. So during the press tour, he was asked by a journalist about referencing suicide in the song and if he would elaborate on those kind of themes, and he refused to, and was then accused of using suicide for impact rather than actually trying to write about it and talk about it, to which Billy Joe responded, I wasn't going to talk about suicide to a complete stranger in some artificial conversation. I feel a lot of responsibility writing about suicide in a song, and then people take it lightly because I won't talk about it in my personal life to someone I've never met before. However, he also told Billboard, I think the word suicide just sounded really good. And the line, I'm a son of a gun, it made sense, but I can't really explain why it made sense. It just sort of does. And I am not going to draw any conclusions on this because I'm confused, but I don't totally get where this song comes from. I do like the song. I have always wondered why he says I'm a son of a gun, so that's good to know. But I don't really know what his intention there was.
Yeah, it's not immediately clear.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like it's always like, well, not always because this came out first, but it's like a very clunky version of Adam's song. I don't know. I don't like that song very much. I don't know what it is about it.
It's the son of a gun repeat in the chorus.
It might be
It's a stupid repeat. There's a lot of instrumentation on this album that they hadn't used before. As we said, Petra Haden plays violin on Hitchin' a Ride. No Doubt's horn section plays the horns on King for a Day. Walking Alone features a harmonica solo by Billy Joe, despite the fact that he had never played one before, because it's a harmonica and you can figure it out. Also, King for a Day, as we said, was written to troll homophobic fans. He told Billboard that it would be funny for a bunch of macho fraternity guys to be singing along, and little do they know, the song is about being in drag, which, like, fair enough. Good play. I respect that a lot. So the last song, clip-wise, that I want to dig into is Jake's hot take about Green Day #1. The song that I want to talk about is the third single from the record that did not perform well as a single at all. That song is Redundant. It only performed well in Australia because it was released as a double A-side with Good Riddance, which became the band's highest charting single in Australia. I assume not because of Redundant. The reason I want to talk about this is that I think this is the best Green Day single of all of their many good singles. I don't know why.
Sorry, let's play it first before...
Okay.
I need a second to digest things. Well, Jake, let me start off before you explain by saying I disagree.
That's fair.
What? That is not the hot take I expected. I know what one of your hot takes is going to be, and I have a feeling it is, but that was unexpected, and yeah, I disagree. So hit me with it. What's the longer explanation here?
I think it's kind of what we were talking about earlier, in the sense that it sort of links older Green Day with newer Green Day. And I am not particularly a newer Green Day fan. I have time for American Idiot, but pretty much everything after that, not for me. But I think that this is to use like music journalism speak, this feels like a real leap in maturity, for lack of a better word, in their music. I think some of the instrumentation on this is a little more interesting than they usually put out for singles. I want to be clear that I don't think this is Green Day's best song. That's not what I'm saying.
Their best single.
I'm strictly speaking singles. I think it's some of Billy Joe's best songwriting. The whole thing, metaphor or on the nose or not, for his at the time struggling marriage, and for how arguments in relationships work. I think it's a really effectively written song, and I think that it was obviously and perhaps rightfully overshadowed by the other singles on this record. But I think I like it because it just doesn't. Every time I listen to this record, that song kind of catches me off guard, especially when it comes right after Nice Guys Finish Last, Hitching a Ride, and The Grouch. And then you have this like sort of late era Replacements-ish kind of song. I just think it's a really interesting, really well written and put together song.
I would give you that it's better than any of their singles from 2000 or later, but no, I disagree with the rest of it. It's like, I think it's fine, but like off the top of my head, Basket Case, Longview, When I Come Around, Walking Contradiction, Nice Guys Finish Last, like I would put all of those ahead of it as far as singles.
Yeah, and I
Brain
get it.
Stew even.
I like the one, Brain Stew Jaded, if that was taken as one, might make my argument disagree with itself. But yeah, I think this one's way, way, way up there.
Yeah, all right.
And that's my take.
Well, we're going to get into some more of Jake's hot takes when we talk about Green Day albums, as well as how Nimrod was received after this. Why don't you tell us how Nimrod was received and how it performed?
So Nimrod was received okay, not great. It was more notable for how it was released than for anything otherwise. They began their promotional tour in 97 at Tower Records in Manhattan by playing an 8-song set. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's extremely weird. During the set, apparently leading up to this, the band was annoyed by the reviews at Nimrod saying that they had lost their punk edge. So in retaliation, while performing at Tower Records in Manhattan, they started a riot in the middle of their set. They're playing like on a riser, like on like the top of a stairwell, basically, with the crowd below them. Trey Cool throws his bass drum into the crowd. At one point, Billy Joe Armstrong is trying to pick up a monitor to drop it on the crowd before he's stopped by security. After the show, Billy Joe Armstrong would run outside and spray paint the words fuck and the word Nimrod on the store's windows and would moon the audience of over 1,400 people. No charges were filed, but the store was closed for the day to repair their damage, which is, I don't know, good for them, I guess. Punk. The tour that they went on was just the three of them, no studio musicians, despite all the instrumentation on this record, which is funny because there's like fucking 80 of them on stage now. Billy Joe Armstrong told the Denver Post about this decision. He said, right now we're refraining from pulling out a lot of that Nimrod stuff. We want to make things small. We don't want to bring a horn section or a violin player out with us. A lot of people want to hear the old stuff, and that stuff is still just as significant to us. This tour, they also stopped playing arenas and only played small theaters. And it was also the first tour where they did their whole invite people on stage to play their songs with them shtick, which like is fun and I like it, but I wish they didn't do it every third song.
Yeah, it was a bit much. I mean, it's cool though. Like,
yeah, I'm sure the kids who are brought on stage to do it are thrilled, and that's great. To your point, to relate to some early Columbia House Party content, on the Nimrod tour, the band was performing at the K-Rock Weenie Roast when Third Eye Blind's bassist ran on stage in the middle of Green Day's set and bear hugged Mike Dirnt, who was completely caught off guard. This escalated into a fight backstage because Mike Dirnt didn't appreciate this.
Do we have an explanation as to why he did that?
I think he thought it'd be funny.
Also, the biggest upset in the history of Columbia House Party that it wasn't Jenkins who started the fight on Third Eye Blind side.
Well, I mean, Mike Dirnt did end up hit in the head with a bottle that caused a skull fracture in this fight. Oh, wow. No one knows who threw the bottle. It was allegedly a fan of Third Eye Blind, but it could have been Jenkins. I don't want to insinuate anything, but it could have been.
It must have been. Must have been is what I would say. Must have been. We don't know because he wasn't wearing a credential as Third Eye Blind is wont to do.
Review-wise, the album was generally pretty well received. Got a 3 out of 5 from AllMusic, who called it an invigorating, if occasionally frustrating listen. It got 3.5 out of 5 from Rolling Stone, 6 out of 10 from Spin, 4.5 out of 5 from Alternative Press, a B- from Entertainment Weekly, a 7 on the nose from Pitchfork, and a 5 out of 10 from NME. In his Rolling Stone review, Greg Kot said that the music is a long way from Green Day's apprenticeship at the Gilman Street Punk Clubs in Berkeley, California, but now that the band has seen the world, it's only fitting that Green Day should finally make an album that sounds as if it has. Writing for the AV Club, Stephen Thompson said that if Green Day still has a loyal following, its fans are bound to find something to like on Nimrod. For all the attempts at diversity, the record is packed with mile-wide hooks and sing-along anthems. And commercially, it did pretty good. It debuted at number 10 on the Billboard 200 and remained on the chart for 70 weeks. In 2000, it was certified as double platinum in the United States. Here in Canada, it peaked at number 4, remaining on the chart for 4 weeks, and was certified as double platinum in Canada as well. It went triple platinum in Australia, peaking at number 3, and it peaked at number 11 on the UK charts. Don't need to get too much into future Green Day because we'll probably cover it again. But they released Warning in 2000, which is a super underrated record, which now might be one of those albums that's overrated because people never stop talking about how underrated it is. I don't know. It was a slight change in sound.
It's the Chris Middleton of Green Day records.
Yeah. It's because it's soft. It has a little more acoustic instrumentation on it. But sort of as I was alluding to with Redundant, and maybe the reason I like Redundant so much, and I also really like Warning, is that I think it features some of Billie Joe's best songwriting. Also a fun Green Day fact for you that you don't know this, and also the people listening. In my last year of university, when American Idiot the Musical was touring in Canada, I actually auditioned for it, and I played this song from Warning in my audition. This is a song called Blood, Sex, and Booze.
So what we're going to do actually is Dylan's going to cut that Green Day version out, and Jake, we're going to get you to sing it, and we're going to try to figure out who sabotaged this, because with your voice and that song, I don't know how you didn't get cast.
Yeah, they cast my friend instead, Dick.
Really?
Yeah, Jake Epstein was in it.
Man.
Boo, Jake.
Talk about throwing bottles at people.
Following Warning, Green Day would attempt to release an album called Cigarettes and Valentines in 2003, but the master recordings were stolen and never recovered, and the album was aborted. Those sessions would then turn into...
Stephen Jenkins strikes again.
And I don't believe those masters have ever been found to this day. It's one of those... Actually, I didn't even make this connection, but boy, we're clever. Episode 1 of season 1, Columbia House Party, we talked about the Lost Weezer album, Songs from the Black Hole, which has been pieced together by fans. Cigarettes and Valentines, same thing. Been pieced together by fans a little bit on the internet. But those sessions that were Cigarettes and Valentines would turn into the band starting over to write the album American Idiot, which launched them into legitimate rock superstardom, which is still kind of a crazy thing to me. Whether you think that's a good thing or not is another debate, which we will have whenever we cover American Idiot. There are theories. So there's a side band of Green Day's that's just Green Day and Jason White using accents called The Network. They released an album in 2003 called Money Money 2020. And there's theories on the internet that album is actually what Cigarettes and Valentines would have been, but that has been denied by Billie Joe Armstrong. But again, the making of American Idiot is genuinely fascinating, which we'll get into another time. In 2009, they released 21st Century Breakdown, which I have an in my notes. Then they released the Uno Dos Tres trilogy in 2012. I have 2 in my notes. In 2016, they did Revolution Radio, which has some okay songs. And then this year, in 2020, they released Father of All Motherfuckers, which I actually thought was kind of okay, other than the lead single. But not a memorable album, I would say.
All right, so that, I think we're almost at the end here, Jake, except we were promised the second Green Day Jake Hot Take. Prepare the hot Jake cannon and let us know. I mean, you basically gave it away earlier. But.
Yeah, so I've said this on Twitter before, but my hot take is that Dookie is like fine. I understand its importance and its place and its success, but I think it's like their 4th best album. And I've never understood why, like I understand from the nostalgia factor and the where most music writers, how old most music writers were when it came out, and sort of
it's the enema of the state thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's a bad record by any means, but I certainly like it more than I like Enema of the State. But I think it's their fourth best album. And now that we've been talking about this, I'm no longer sold on Nimrod being their best album, which is funny, even though it's always been my favorite.
So why don't I give you my order?
Okay.
And then you can play off of that. So I have it. I only went to the top. I did a top 5 because honestly, anything after Warning. I mean, I guess I listened to American Idiot, but then I was like, you know what? This might be it for...
My 8th ranked album here is just the rest of them. So.
Yeah. So I went, I have Insomniac number 1, Dookie, Nimrod, Kerplunk, Warning as the top 5.
So we have the same top 5, just in a different order.
Okay.
So I have Nimrod at 1, Insomniac at 2, Kerplunk at 3, Dookie at 4, Warning at 5. But from going back and listening to it this week and talking about it, I kind of think I agree with you. And I kind of think Insomnia is their best record.
Wow, Blake wins the hot take.
Yeah, I think Insomniac's the best one. I
didn't even have to try to convince you. There's no reason other than I just really like it. Like I don't have like a deep connection, like deeper connection or anything like that. I just, I really like those 4 albums, Insomniac, Dookie, Nimrod, Kerplunk, and I think I just like Insomniac the best.
I think Green Day works better when they're works best when they're taking themselves seriously, but not as seriously as they took themselves maybe on something like 21st Century Breakdown. And I think Insomniac is the perfect balance of that. It's definitely the darkest album. It's the beefiest sounding one for sure.
We love a beefy album.
We do love a beefy boy.
Album, beefy baseball players, beefy point guards. We just give us the beef.
Insomniac's our thick son. Turn up the beef, as Popstar would say.
There you go. Insomniac is Green Day's thickest album, and therefore the best one. All right, we now have to also pick a song off of this, off of the album that we've just knocked down a peg. Nimrod,
the album that we now wish we had done a different album.
No, I mean, it's such a transitional album for Green Day in terms of commercial success and like where they'd go in terms of, I guess not genre, but sound. It's an important Green Day album, especially if you're someone who really likes Dookie and Kerplunk era Green Day and doesn't like modern Green Day. Like, this is the album where you figure out what happened and where, like, how that happens, really.
Yeah.
But anyway, we need a song off of Nimrod for the mixtape, Jake.
So I will always go to bat for Redundant, of course, but...
Of course you are.
I kind of want to go with Nice Guys Finish Last because I feel like it doesn't get enough love in the Green Day canon.
And we're a couple of nice guys who quite often finish last, so...
Very frequently.
There you go. Incel Anthem. Nice Guys Finish Last. Going on the mixtape. Oh boy.